everybody, and welcome to another review by ThinkerThemer. I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie, and together we review games from two different perspectives. I'm all about the mechanics and Maggie is all about the theme. Today we're excited to be reviewing this copy of Endless Winter Paleo-Americans by Stan Kodonsky, the designer and publishers, Fantasia, working in collaboration with Australian publisher Guff Studios. This is a pre-production retail copy that we've been kindly lent by Guff Studios, so we could do this early review. But as always, this is an independent review. If you enjoy reviews like this, please ensure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now, I just want to start by saying that Endless Winter was one of our most anticipated games of this year. So if you have been following along with Backchat, when we talked through the campaign, we've been super excited to get this to the table. So I can't wait to share our thoughts with you.
Okay, so in Endless Winter, we find ourselves in a Paleolithic era inspired setting where we're going to be leading our tribes to be the most successful or prosperous of tribes. And the way we're going to do that is through, well, growing our people, developing them, finding, different professions, but also through culture and through hunting and expanding our settlements. At the end of the game, whoever has the most points in the form of, all of these different accomplishments, I should say, is going to be the winner.
Now, this game is a mixed bag of mechanics, and two of the mechanics that were really highlighted during the campaign and made comparison to games like Dune Imperium and the Lost Ruins of Arnak quite possible and frequent, is the fact that it includes deck building and worker placement. And in this game, worker placement is the driver for your action selection in this game. However, there are only 4 worker placement spots. That's shown on the main board there where Maggie is pointing to, because I can't quite reach it in this review. There is a lot going on. So there are 4 main worker placement spots, and these spots can be occupied by more than one person. So unlike some worker placement games where you get locked out, anyone can go there. But the benefit of going there first is that at the bottom of the action, you can see that there is a little circle with some bonuses in there in the form of additional actions or resources that you will get to have if you're the first person to take that worker placement spot. The interesting thing about these worker placement spots as well is that they are an action track, is what they call them, because if I was to select this worker placement spot, I would go through a series of steps that are done in order that is going to enable me to take a collection of actions rather than just one thing. So you're thinking about not only the order of that, but all of the resources that I'm going to have to spend in order to be able to complete that action. But that's not where the complexity ends in this game, because most of these actions require you to have labor points. And these labor points come into effect in the hand of cards that you have, that you're drawing from a deck, that you're building to with cards that you're drafting. And so let me take a step back. In order to complete an action at each of these worker placement spots, you're going to have to look at the amount of labor that you have available to spend in your current hand of cards. And that is going to put some restrictions on where you want to allocate that over the 3 workers that you have to place every round. The other 2 resources that you're going to need to get by in this game are tracked on your player board, and they're in the form of meat and tools. And meat you can collect through a variety of ways in the game, but one of the main ways is by killing the animals that you're going to be collecting from this animal board here. However, the trade-off with that is that these animals, if a mini set collection game, and if you're able to collect animals of the same type, which is done through one of these worker placement actions, they're going to give you victory points at the end of the game. So do you kill them for their meat, or do you keep them for their victory points at the end of the game? The other main resource that you're going to need to get things done in this game are tools. And again, tools can be collected in a variety of ways in this game. And you can see that this is tracked here, and the maximum you can have is 5. This is the harder resource to collect in this game, but there are lots of opportunities to exchange meat for tools using cards that are available in this game. And the other cool thing is that if you don't have enough labor in your hand, you can also spend meat as labor. So at the top of the meat track, you can see there are also labor points that are going to allow you to get those actions done at the worker placement spots. So if this fourth worker placement spot is all about collecting animals, then what are the other ones about? Well, this one here is all to do with this separate mini game that's going on, this area control game. Now, every game will have a variable set up for these tiles, and everyone is setting up these little camps on top of these tiles. And essentially what this game is doing is area control, vying for control over different end of round bonuses. And the way that you're going to be doing that is placing out these camps on adjacent spaces to your other camps. And then once you have 3 on adjacent tiles that connect, you can put one of these villages there. Now, the area control element is most interesting because you need to have those 3 camps, but as you're putting camps out, you're actually increasing your total capacity for storing meat because you have more camps. But as soon as you set up a village, these camps come back, so reducing the amount of meat that you can now store. However, these villages have 2 different benefits. The first benefit is the camps are only worth 1 value when vying for control over these different tile benefits, whereas the village is worth 2 on each of the adjacent tiles. So it helps you to break ties and to kind of win this area control game. They also, as you reveal them, give you an opportunity to, at the end of each round, draw more cards from your deck into your hand, so giving you this ongoing benefit. So this part of the game is giving you ongoing benefits that can be really useful in terms of resources and sometimes just straight victory points. This worker placement spot is all about the culture cards, and these culture cards are shown here, these 8 cards. They are going to shift in terms of their complexity and level of benefit towards the second half of this game. This game is played out in 4 different rounds, and this will change halfway through the game to this higher powered deck. But the culture cards are interesting because you will be drafting those into your hand, and they will form part of your deck that you'll be shuffling and redrawing 5 cards from at the start of every round. But the culture cards give you a one-off, usually really powerful benefit. So here you can see this one gives me 3 tools. You can play 1 culture card for free at the start of your turn, but then you can also discard an additional card to play another culture card at the start of your turn. And the more you collect of these, of course, you're creating this really powerful deck of cards. So these are important, and you pay for them and collect them here at this worker placement spot. The other thing that you can get done at this worker placement spot is you can pay resources to collect the stones that you can see at the top of the board. These stones slot nicely into these dual layer player boards, and they're going to give you scoring conditions that will score at the end of every round during an eclipse phase. And so that's just a way to build up victory points based on things that you've been getting done in other parts of the game. So the final worker placement spot relates to these action cards that are going to go into your deck. And interestingly, in this game, the more you collect of one type, each of these cards really relates to one of those worker placement spots. And when they're used correctly with their accompanying worker placement spot, they're going to give you bonus labor points to use there. And so if you want to specialize, for example, if you continue collecting these hunter cards, then when you go to the hunter worker placement spot, you are going to have more powerful action labor points available to you to use in the set collection game. So you can kind of build your deck according to what you want to specialize in, or if you're playing a more balanced game, then you want to be recruiting from each of these different piles that are all the same underneath, by the way. The other thing that this spot does for you is that you can use the trashing ability in this game, which is to clean out your deck of cards from less powerful cards or things that you don't really want in there anymore. Because at the start of the game, like a lot of deck builders, you will have these tribesmen that are fairly weak in that they don't have a lot of additional benefit aside from giving you labor points. So you might want to clean those out as you replace them with more powerful cards. And you do that in the burial grounds, where you'll be placing cards underneath there and storing them. And that is actually going to score you points at the end of the game, which brings me to the last board in the base game of this game.
Second to last.
Second.
There's the more megaliths. Oh, yeah. There's more boards to come.
There's more boards. So this board here is simply two tracks that are tracking two different things that are going to score you victory points at the end of the game. On the right-hand side, you want to work your way up this track because the person who is at the highest of this track at the end of the game is going to be able to score more points for the cards that they've buried in their burial ground. And on the left-hand side of this track, this is going to enable you to exchange any resources left over for victory points at a higher exchange rate, depending on how high you are up on that board. And I correct myself, thank you Maggie, or Maggie corrected me. There is one final part of this game in the base game that is the megalith building that happens over here in this little side game. There are spots in this game, such as in the area control game here, some of the culture cards will enable it. If you are first player, which I'll come back to in a moment, you'll also get to build a megalith. These are coming from your board. These are little tiles which represent the megaliths, and you are going to be building them out on this board in exchange for the resources or actions that you're covering up. And as you build out, if you are able to hopefully build on top of yourself here, you're going to be getting bonus victory points along the way. It's a little mini game that's going to give you victory points and some bonuses along the way, and usually becomes very important in the game. The other element of this is...
But wait, there's more.
There's more. Is the card play in this game, because these are multi-use cards. And the interesting tension in this game is you can use cards such as, this is a better example, you can use cards such as the Hunter to play during the worker placement phase where you want to cash them in to have more labor points to spend, or you can store them in your hand, and at the end of every round, all players are going to secretly place down a number of cards in front of them, because you have the option to store cards for a future round if you want, and we're all going to reveal them at the same time. And this has two benefits to a player by placing them down in front of them. The first is the person who places the most cards with the most number of labor points is going to become the first player for the next round. And first player advantage is important because of those bonuses that we mentioned for the worker placement spots that you get if you're the first person that goes there. The second thing is that each of these cards has an alternative use, which is to use the Eclipse ability. If you play a card in this way when they are revealed, you then get to take all of the bonuses shown at the bottom of the cards that you've played. And that's going to set you up well for the next round of the game by giving you generally a lot of good resources or helping you move up this track, for example. So that's the choice that you have to make. The other thing about that reveal is you can secretly throw in some culture cards which aren't used in this way at all, just to throw your opponents off in terms of how many cards you've got stashed there, and they actually return to your hand, when they're revealed. So it's just a little way of spicing up that game.
Micro bluff, if you will.
Micro bluff, that's but that's a basic overview of the game. We'll talk more about the gameplay as we go into the review. So firstly, as you can see, we could barely fit all of the components into the video, that overhead for this game. A lot of
table real estate space that it takes.
It takes up a lot of real estate.
And this is just a two-player game. And your board, actually, you do need quite a lot of space around it because you're going to do things on top, bottom, left, and right of it.
Yeah, so you're collecting your animals at the bottom, you're discarding cards on the right, your deck's on the left, and then the cards that you're actually using and playing go above, which I can't even fit here on our game table. So first of of all, you need quite a large table for this.
Yes.
There are a lot of sprawling different components, as you would gather from
a lot of boards.
the way that I tried to explain how this game works. There are a lot of individual mini games that you need to explain as part of this game. But I want to talk about like our favorite, least favorite, and most favorite parts of this game. And I'll start with my most favorite parts about my most favorite part about this game. And you probably won't be surprised that it's the multi-use cards. I actually find that the card play and the hand management that goes into the decisions in this game is the most interesting part about it. I enjoy the interaction between the cards and the worker placement spots. I think that is really clever, that you are trying to actively manage the amount of labor that you have in your hand, that you're trying to get as many cards as you can in your hand so that you have more labor available to you. But that's not the only thing, because then it interacts with the resources on your board. So the level of thought that has gone into the way these cards work, I think, is really actually quite incredible, because the other question that you need to ask yourself is, do I want to save this card and not use it for its eclipse or between round bonus, and that game where I've just said to you that I think first player is quite important, and to do that you need to not use the card and play it in that surprise reveal part of the game. And so I really appreciate that about the card play in this game. I also really like the culture cards and the fact that, you know, they've got some really powerful, cool bonuses. And when you have that in your hand, it usually enables you to unlock something by playing it at the start of your turn that, you know, otherwise you wouldn't be able to use in the worker placement game. So the cards are excellent. The deck building element is also, you know, really great. You know, one point that they used to about when they're selling this game is about like the specialization and like how your tribe can become stronger in different areas depending on the cards that you're drafting. Yes, that's true, but I feel like the game forces you to have a balanced approach to all of these mini games. And so in some ways, I do feel as though you're going to end up getting a spread of these. It's just about kind of how you optimize as and when they hit your hand that becomes more interesting to me.
Yeah, I think in terms of the bits that I enjoyed the most about this, I think it's probably just more the discovery phase. So I enjoyed that, but yeah, as you said, like with the culture cards, kind of going, oh, what's this? What would I get for that? And just exploring how the different things we're going to balance in terms of like, well, you know. As I was playing multiple games, going, could I go stronger on the area control? Could I go, you know, what happens if I just go really like intense in the megalith? One of the things that I realized though is that you do reach limits. So there's a finite number of megaliths that you can build. So you get to a point where you go, oh, I've built all of them. And several times it happened in games where you're gearing up to like or build another village, and you go, oh, actually, like I've been doing all of this to get my 3 camps ready to go, and now I'm going to turn them into, and then you realize, I've already placed all my villages, and so that's sort of a bit of a waste. So you can have, it doesn't really allow you to almost fully exploring any one of the avenues reaches a wall at some point.
Yeah, so you do need to be a bit more balanced. I also want to say, you know, the parts of the game that I enjoy less, obviously area control is more my thing than yours. I really love area control. This one is just like, to me, a means to an end, because it doesn't really give you bonuses at the end of the game aside from, you know, the bonuses that you've already unlocked, and that's very useful throughout the course of the game. So I feel like I need to do that rather than I want to do that. It's not like a super fun element. It's just like, okay, well, I actually just need to do that so I can get some ongoing resources. For me, the tension in the worker placement is interesting because, yes, there's a first player advantage for going to that spot and getting the additional bonuses, but anyone can go there after that. And for me, I love worker placement, one of my favorite mechanics, if not my favorite mechanic. However, it really reduces the tension around that because everybody can go there. There's only 4 spots really. So the worker placement element of this game is much more subdued than Lost Ruins of Arnak and Dune Imperium, like far subdued. And this is much more about the deck building and the card play in this game. So the emphasis is very much shifted towards that. So if you felt those other games didn't have enough of the deck building elements like a lot of people did, then this might might scratch that itch for you at the cost of the
Yes.
worker placement game.
Yeah.
And I tend to love worker placement. So for me, not enough tension in that worker placement game
Yeah.
for me to
I would
love
agree.
it.
The other thing that I find with the worker placement is sometimes, and again, because you're playing that balance of, which of these cards do I want to use for my eclipse, save them up for my eclipse phase, versus, because I really want that eclipse ability that they have, versus, I'll use them during and have often I found that, I was sort of saving things for the eclipse and almost having like a nothing daylight or non-eclipse turn, where I was like, well, I don't really have enough labor, and I wasn't even all that invested in what the actions that I could take. You can always take a rest action, which is kind of like your distress action, which also gives you a 1.5 labor
Powerful
power.
distress action, though.
Yeah. So it's like a 1.5 power towards that eclipse, towards the majority for the turn order, and then it allows you to kind of get cards and kill an animal and get the food from that. So I sometimes find myself doing that. I also should mention there's one of the other little mini modules that you can add is making that eclipse, that rest action even a little bit more exciting.
More fruitful, yeah.
Fruitful, yeah, because you have these little tokens that then, you gain one of those tokens and they give you, for example, this one would be to place a megalith as well, or to uncover more animals, refresh the animal pool. So
I do like what the game does to counteract when you get stuck. So if you get really stuck and you're like, well, I've got 3 workers, but I don't really have enough labor to get anything done, there are ways that you can mitigate against that. You can take a rest early, which is going to allow you to draw a card, which means you're going to get more, you could potentially get more labor there.
Yeah.
Or you can use an action that allows you to draft a card into your hand as opposed to into your discard, which is then going to open up more opportunities for your remaining workers. So when you do get stuck in this game, there are ways that you can try and then, enable yourself to have more of a turn for your second and third worker. So I do like that about the game.
I'll add one little extra thing. You also have the kind of like your specialist chief, who what I like is they all come with their, like, obviously they all have their own kind of little mini. And you just put the color of whatever your player color is, so you can play as a different one every game. But then they also come with their own little card and their own special ability. So for example, with Chief Looking Hand, Chief Looking Hand specializes in this spot, or this action spot, which is all about kind of gaining people. So whenever you're going into that spot with your chief, then you can, and this is something that you would lock in at the start of the game. You can either get the ability of you'd be getting 2 food, or you'd be getting 1 axe or 1 tool. So all of them have like a little mini asymmetric little ability, and there's a little option as well as to which side you want to lock in for your game. I enjoy that as well.
The other thing I want to talk about is, because we've now talked about why it's important to balance the things that you're doing in this game. You need to do a little bit of everything, with maybe the exception of the animals. You want to be like trying to do as many things, and animals can be a little bonus at the end of the game. But that means for this game that when you play it, by the time we realized that, started focusing on more of a balanced strategy, started getting higher levels of victory points for doing that, and being rewarded for that, then by the time we hit game 4, 5, 6, it started to feel a little bit repetitive, because there are things that I know I need to get done. And even though the tension between what you draw from your deck is always interesting, I did find that always interesting, it still felt like I was on a very similar path for my game. And so that's where, if you were part of the Kickstarter campaign, you'll know that there are quite a lot of expansion modules for this game that are being released, and it made sense to me why that is the case now that I've played the base game. So if you're thinking about getting the base game only, I would say that probably after a while it does start to feel a bit similar, and especially because there's only 4 worker placement spots. There's only 4 main choices there.
5 kind of specialists, and like these, even though it's like, it looks like, oh, there's so many cards, they're all the same card, like they're all the same type.
Which is why I wanted to talk about one of the expansions in particular. Now that I've played the game, I went back and had a look at what does each of the modules bring. And there is an expansion called Ancestors, which fundamentally, I believe, changes the cards that are here, both these action cards as well as the culture cards, and also introduces another element of interaction between players. And so for me, that would be the most useful module. I haven't played any of them,
no, I haven't played
but that would be the one that I'd be most interested in adding, because I am so focused, and I think the game is very focused on the card play. That's going to be the one that's going to have the most impact to how I play the game.
One downside for me, like sort of relating to this, is how there's so many things that feel different but actually are the same. So there's a lot of almost uniformity that, like, for example, with the animals, it's like you have all these different animals, but in essence, most of them have the exact same breakdown in terms of like the set collection. So it's like for all of them, or for most of them, it's a, 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then you all get, 1, 3 points, 6 points, or 10 points. Same within the stones. A lot of the stones is like the exact same breakdown for points, and it's just like which color combo of animals you get, or which presents you get here. Same with, so a lot of these elements felt like I wanted more variety.
But that's why I do think that a lot of the expansions address those things, and so this game is one that I feel like does need that. I feel like they've recognized that, and that's why there are so many expansions. But at the same time, I feel as though it's kind of an interesting thing, because this game needs expansions, but I've already said this game takes up so much table space. It does, and it is a beast to teach, because there's so many different components, and it's a bit of a beast to learn, because you're trying to work out, well, what does this have to do with anything, and like, how do I introduce that into my strategy at all, and just trying to think about how all these things come together. It's going to be a harder game than others to get to the table, and that's something that concerns me about having this game in our collection, is that I'm just not sure about the amount of energy that I want to expend to get this to the table. It also has a huge setup, because there are so many pieces, so you need to constantly be, you start your game, got to refer to the rule book. How do I set this up? How do I set this up? And so there's a lot to this game, and so that is, and then there's a lot to it, but it needs more, is kind of like this strange place for this game, and it's made it really hard to review, because I'm not sure how I feel about it in terms of wanting to get back into it all of the time, because it feels a little too repetitive at its base level for the amount of effort it takes to set up, and the table space.
I would agree
and
with
the teach.
I would agree with that. And it does feel like the even though there's things that kind of correlate with one another, still feels like separate little mini games that you're playing. It's not like one sort of swift, like this all kind of, so like even from like a thematic feel, there's elements of it where I'm like, oh yeah, so I'm expanding my presence here. But there's been other games that I felt more like, I very rarely did I feel like, oh yes, this is the Paleolithic era, and this is like, it was very easy to kind of almost switch off from that and be like, okay, I'm kind of going to go here, and I'm going to do
different levers in the game. So let's talk about the theme and the setting in which this takes place, because this game takes place in Paleolithic era, kind of very, very
10,000 BC.
Yeah, so like a very long time ago, where, there's historical evidence of what was happening in that era, but obviously it is very much kind of start of humankind. There's not a lot of information about what it was actually like. And so we actually got in touch with Fantasia Games to talk through their process a little bit and their feelings about the context of the game. And they did say up front, this is historical fiction, and they identify parts of the game where, it probably wasn't true to reality. Of course, the caricature style of the Miko's art here is taking a lot of liberties about the people of the time. Also, the animals. A lot of those animals were not native to North America or the Americas at all, and they've been added in for variety. And that is an interesting concept, because, we are very aware of the setting and the especially the cultural elements in a game. And this game feels like a bit of a hodgepodge of things, and calling it historical fiction is fine, but in the rulebook it actually doesn't state anything about historical fiction.
And even through like the description and BGG and things like that, there's nothing calling that out.
No, it's very much, it refers to North America.
Yeah.
And so I wish there was just more of that context in the rulebook, and that's kind of what we would ask of any game and any publisher, is that if there are elements that, you know, are probably definitely not historically accurate, I'd love that to be called out in the rulebook, because I'm interested to know, you know, what was this time like? And as a gamer, I go in, I'm not very historically knowledgeable.
Same.
And so
it's like you assume and you trust that it's like, oh, what they're telling you is, you know, what was happening or what we know of that era so far.
Yeah.
And so which may be naive, but it's like that is genuinely how
you go in.
And a lot of people would approach something like, oh, okay, I'm gonna
and sometimes games become your reference for that point in time. And so I wish there was more of that in the rule book. That is just, you know, something that we were thinking about a lot as we were playing this game. The final thing that I do want to talk about before we wrap up is player count. So we have played this multiplayer. We've played this, you know, just the two of us, 2-player, and Maggie, you've also played it solo. From my experience, obviously not being a solo gamer, I much prefer this at a higher player count. And there's a few reasons for this. Obviously, any game with area control, that becomes much more interesting when you're vying for control with more players. But that element of everyone putting the cards down and revealing at the same time became a bit boring with just the two of us, because I could see Maggie had 10 cards and I had 2, and I'm like, well, who's going to win this one? But that became, and the bluffing element became much more interesting when there were more players in the game. Also, there is an interesting interaction between the worker placement spots, your ability to get the bonus actions, and the number of players in the game. Obviously, in a 4-player game, everyone's probably going to get one of the bonuses. But in a 3-player game, the first player is going to get it twice if they want to. And so then it becomes even more important to be first player. So I thought that was an interesting dynamic with player count. But I probably wouldn't get this game out for 2 players for multiple reasons, because the small amounts of tension that I enjoy in this game become a little bit more evaporated at 2 players, but also it's such a big game to get out for 2 players that it's kind of like you have to be really committed to playing it.
It's a mammoth. It's a woolly mammoth.
It is a woolly mammoth to set up. And your solo experience.
I'll speak about the solo experience. So the solo experience is essentially replicating a 2-player game with an AI that you facilitate. The AI is called the Nomad, and it's essentially this Nomad deck. And so what happens is you would set up the game as if it's a 2-player game. You give the Nomad, their player board and their color. And then they're going to be using these cards where for every turn that the Nomad takes, one of these cards gets revealed, and then it shows you which of the action spots they're going to be prioritizing or placing their worker down. So sometimes if that track is already taken, you've got these little arrows that then tell you kind of like in which direction they would go to the next available that hasn't had the bonus area taken. And then once you kind of decide know what track that is, that's just to block off that bonus, but the actual actions that they take are dictated in the card. So for example, if we go here, so if the AI were to go in this track, they would be revealing animals, and they would be getting an animal from the top of the deck. If you wanted to scale the difficulty, what would happen is every time you're going to be getting another card is going to be set up at the top, and so you're going to have now for their second turn, they're going to be taking 3 actions. To scale up the difficulty, you would have started with an additional card at the bottom, so they're essentially getting to take more actions and have more opportunity to accumulate points. So for people that don't like a beat your own score type game, they want to beat the score of an AI, this would be very suitable for. For me, I do actually enjoy a beat your own score type game, and I don't enjoy having to facilitate an AI. Even though this was not a heavy admin in terms of facilitation, I would say it's like moderate facilitation admin, and that was enough to kind of pull me away from my game or what I wanted to do. I did get a chance to explore some other areas of the game. So I think, again, if you don't mind facilitating AIs, this is a perfectly good way of replicating.
I also noticed that after Maggie was playing solo, she was able to beat me.
Well, because I realized the power of that track. So that was what made me go, oh, okay, that's actually really powerful. So like I just started going with the shaman and making sure that with those eclipse, like I was moving up those tracks and making sure that obviously I always had at least my 7 cards buried by the end of it. Yeah. But again, even with that, so it's like it allows you to explore the game and almost like find the cracks or the bits that can be exploited. Exploited for points. But again, it's not a game that I would myself myself, because overall the game is something that I enjoy, but I'm not like, oh my goodness, about. Yeah, so I wouldn't be the one to bring it out to just play solo.
That's the thing. It's like it's going to suffer from the same problem with two players, is that it's a huge setup in order to play a game solo. But if you're super committed, you've got the time to set it up, then sure. And now if you've been watching along with our new series on our channel, you'll know that we've started rating games out of 10, and so we'll of course do that here. I think for me, the natural comparison points are going to be Dune Imperium and the Lost Ruins of Arnak. I think the card play is superior to both of those games by far. But as I mentioned, the worker placement is more subdued, and the teach is much bigger. So Lost Ruins of Arnak, the reason why it's in our collection is that I feel like it's quite a simple teach. There's not too many elements and people can get into it really quickly and it doesn't feel like overwhelming. So that's why that's in our collection. Dune Imperium was moved on from our collection, even though we enjoyed the game. The thematic overlay didn't really do it for us. And so, that was moved on. This one, for me, there are elements that I like and dislike. As if you've watched this review, you would know that, it's a little too much for the teach for me. And there are, after a while, it does start to feel a bit repetitive. But I have to give it props for the card element of the game. I just, I love exploring new mechanics and the way that the worker placement interacts with the cards and the way that you have to deal with the labor points versus, saving your cards for the eclipse phase. I did enjoy that element of the game, even though that element of the game is very multiplayer solitaire, because that's a game I'm playing with myself. There's a little bit of interaction in the blind reveal, but for the most part, I'm just trying to manage my hand. But I like hand management. So for me, this game is probably about a 7.4.
Okay. For me, I think the rating would actually be a 7. And the reason for that is, I think part of that, it really, the replayability is one of the things that kind of hurt it. And the fact that this is all like, it almost feels like not true variety. It's like I wanted more variety, and I wanted, for example, those animals to feel really differently in terms of like those set collections or the points in those stones. And a lot of it felt like these are just different colors for the same ultimate puzzle. Again, it's such a big thing to set up for what I feel like. And so many times I would go through turns where I was like, I didn't really get it. Like none of the action positions that I took felt satisfying. So I think for that reason, overall, it's a game that is like, I appreciate everything that went into it. I think it's a really beautiful production. Like I really like all the elements in terms of the production, but the experience of it playing it is like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I find it an okay time.
Yeah, and I think overall our ratings are a little bit suppressed, just thinking about how easy it will be to get to our table for our particular group, and the fact we play with lots of different players and teaching and all of those elements factor into our score. So, but certainly I can see a lot of people enjoying this game. Particularly, I don't think there's a huge amount of tension in the game, aside from the tension that you have with yourself of like being able to get things done with the right amount of labor and resources on hand. The tension is built into the efficiency puzzle of what you're doing yourself versus the tension with other players around the table. That's how I feel about the game, and that's typically the tension that we enjoy is the competitive tension. And so, I don't know, it does sit in a weird place, this game, but I can certainly see that a lot of people will really thrive on this. And without having played the expansions, this is a rating based purely on the base game. So that could be subject to change as we get an opportunity to try those expansions. But we hope you've enjoyed listening to our thoughts on Endless Winter. If you did, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.